everyone. I'm Julie Nutter, the Director of Professional Policy Issues here at AFSA. First, I want to thank you all for participating in this webinar. We have over 90 people who have registered, which is fantastic and a great testament to your engagement. One of the regular activities we have here at AFSA is structured conversations, which are conversations we have with active duty members to discuss about their Foreign Service careers and their Foreign Service lives. We ask members 3 open-ended questions, the first of which always elicits the most conversation. And question is, tell me about your Foreign Service career, the good, the bad, and the ugly. One of the, and this question for us is the thing that usually kicks off a discussion of family member employment. The fact that this family member employment concern is so consistent is a principal reason why we put on this webinar. The other reason is we want to focus on employment outside the embassy. Oh my God. Outside the embassy, because we believe that there are resources devoted to employment inside the embassy, but not enough attention being paid to folks who want to either create or maintain careers outside the embassy. So just be assured that your spouses are listening, that they do reflect your concerns about employment back to AFSA, and we take these comments very seriously. We sincerely hope that your spouses or other family members are already AFSA members. Don't worry, we're not going to check. You might want to check if they're members. More than 80% of active duty Foreign Service members decide to join. So for all of you who are connected with AFSA members, AFSA's website now has some great information targeted to those of you who own businesses. You can now get a huge discount on one-time advertising in the Foreign Service Journal. You can also list your businesses on AFSA's website for free. So check out the webpage. Now let's get to the webinar. We have 4 speakers today. We're still waiting for one of them who have successfully created a career outside the embassy. They'll each tell us their brief stories of success, and we hope you have plenty of questions for them. You can pose questions anytime during the webinar. You don't have to wait till the end of the presentations. We'll try our best to get to all the questions, but we do have a lot of people online, so we'll do our best. I'll read out the questions, and if you want a question directed to a specific speaker, please send in the question. Cheryl Edison Henway is Senior Manager at the International Finance Corporation, the private sector arm of the World Bank Group. She has had an 18-year career with the IFC in Washington, Mexico City, Rio de Janeiro, Sao Paulo, and now Vienna. Prior to the IFC, she worked as a consultant in the United States, Caracas, and from Costa Rica. She has been in EFM for 26 years and has a middle school daughter and a Labrador Retriever. Donna Scaramastra Gorman is the associate editor of the Foreign Service Journal. Donna's writing has been published in Time Magazine, Newsweek, The Washington Post, the Christian Science Monitor, the Huffington Post, and many other outlets. She's the author of the book, Am I Going to Starve to Death? A Survival Guide for the Foreign Service Spouse. Donna has a master's degree in Slavic languages and literature. Before following her husband into the Foreign Service, she worked at BBDO, Worldwide Advertising Agency, where she was their business development and media relations manager. Jeremy Pollack follows a disciplined process that begins with first taking the time to fully understand each of his clients' particular needs, concerns, and priorities. And he's passionate about delivering excellent service. Jeremy holds the Certified Financial Planner designation. Jessica Pauley Hayden is an attorney and a writer. She's a graduate of the Georgetown University Law Center and has worked as a litigator at the DC firm Williams & Connolly. Most recently, she has served as the Group Chief Compliance Officer for 21st Century Fox and is currently with Disney. She and her husband have 3 children and have lived in Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, and just returned to the US after 4 years together in Turkey and a 5th with her husband in Iraq. We hope Jessica, oh, there she is. Jessica's here. That's fantastic. So let's get on with the show. Cheryl, you're first up.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Some of my background was shared in the bio, but I will repeat some of it and then build upon it. As the introduction said, I have been a Foreign Service spouse for 26 years. 19 of those years we've been abroad in various different assignments, and I have been able to craft a career around each one of our moves. I'll be perfectly honest that we joined the Foreign Service together, already married, and made a cognizant decision that we were going to make a dual career track work. We didn't exactly know what that was going to mean and how it was all going to play out at the time that we joined, but it was very much a conscious decision. And I will say now, many years into it, it's been a lot of hard work at different points in time. It's been some very intentional and mindful moves with compromises that came along the way. We've certainly made some strategic or maybe better referred to as tactical decisions at certain points in time in connection with trying to make both of the careers work. As was said in the introduction, we've served overseas in Caracas, Venezuela, in San Jose, Costa Rica, in Rio de Janeiro, Mexico City, and Sao Paulo, Brazil. My husband did an unaccompanied assignment at one point in time after that in Iraq, and he is now in Frankfurt, and I'm in Vienna. So some of what you'll hear in terms of our story has not always had us together, but we've been together for the vast majority of the time that he's been serving both domestically and abroad, again, with conscious decisions there. So in the earliest years, when he joined the Foreign Service, I was already working as a consultant with Anderson and was able to make a transfer to his first posting in Venezuela, helping them actually to open an office in Caracas. That went well, very exciting, lots of learning. Only unfortunately, with his second transfer to Costa Rica, I tried to continue working for Anderson, and I'll be perfectly honest, in a corporate environment that has offices everywhere around the world, has people traveling constantly for consulting, it quite honestly just wasn't working for us. I wasn't being treated very fairly. They weren't being nearly as flexible as one would think that they may have been able to have been. And I made a conscious decision to quit and to go freelance and make something work on my own. That worked reasonably well. It was a part-time position where I was actually continuing to work in Venezuela, so there was traveling involved. Freelance consulting to one of my clients that had been an Anderson client while we were in Venezuela. At the same time, since it was part-time work, I had a stint during that period in which I was an EFM employed in the embassy I backed up several people that went on maternity leave under various different arrangements that were able to be put in place through the consular section. I was a bookkeeper for the commissary. I did volunteer work. I basically crafted something together. I didn't see that as something that I wanted to have be long-term, so made a cognizant decision at that point in time to actually invest and go to business school during one of his domestic assignments. So I went and got an MBA full-time, separated while he was in Washington. I was in Philadelphia getting a business degree with a view that coming out of that, I would leverage it in some way to make a continued career move work. And it's coming out of business school that I actually joined IFC, International Finance Corporation, which, as was said in my bio, is the private sector arm of the World Bank. It's also a Washington, D.C. based international organization, hence the theory in joining, and really a lot of conviction and determination was that there has to be a way that this can work as a dual career. And of course, since I've been with IFC now for 18 months, the story at the end is, yes, it has worked. And the theory that we went in with has panned out, but it's happened with a lot of hard work. Really the transfer cycles and the moves, while we've been able to successfully get, quote unquote, tandem assignments with two different organizations with each one of the moves, the timing and the bid cycle for state is very different from an organization like the World Bank that makes decisions very quickly and expects you to move in a matter of a couple of weeks. The compromises that we've made along the way were because we had made the decision coming into the Foreign Service to have a dual career, tandem career work. There have definitely been certain points in the career where his assignment has taken priority. He's gotten an assignment and I've said, go for it. I'll figure something out. In return, I can honestly report that while he's had a long, successful Foreign Service career, he's also made a number of compromises and had a number of opportunities come up that he declined precisely because he knew they weren't going to be situations where I would be able to work while we were abroad, or just wasn't going to be the right setup for both of us and for our family. So again, strategic decisions to take turns leading to make it work. We have been together in each one of the assignments until the final assignment in the final year of being in Sao Paulo. We had a 3-year posting. I was there leading IFC's infrastructure practice and was not comfortable nor willing or interested in making a move when his assignment had clearly come to an end. It was just at the start of some very interesting projects on my side. We also had a child that was finishing up a very important stage in schooling, and it just wasn't an ideal time for the family to move. So something that we swore we were never going to do when we joined the Foreign Service together and weren't going to split the family became really the most logical decision at that point in time. And he took an unaccompanied assignment to Iraq precisely so that my daughter and I could stay in Sao Paulo for 1 year, both for my career and her education. The story continues after seeing how that 1 year unaccompanied, very tough, but very fulfilling because it was a good career move on my side. He got the opportunity to take a position. He is currently in Frankfurt. I encouraged him absolutely to take that position coming out of Iraq. It was the absolute right thing for his career. I will be perfectly honest, I had absolutely no idea exactly how I was going to make that work. Germany is not an operational country for IFC and the World Bank. We have a 1 or 2 person office there. It's really not a place where it was going to be something where I knew for sure that I was going to be able to work. I encouraged him to take the position, and about 6 months later, the opportunity that I have now came along for me really as an absolute career changer as well, to be the regional senior manager for all of IFC's infrastructure investment and advisory activities for infrastructure for all of Europe and Central Asia. So a very big move, very big promotion really for me, but the compromise that came with it was, again, we're in a situation where we're splitting the family. My daughter lives with my husband in Frankfurt, and I'm commuting on a weekly basis into Vienna, Istanbul, Kiev, wherever I need to be for work. The office is in Vienna, but I don't spend much time in Vienna. I'm actually traveling a fairly significant amount. Again, it's a compromise, but it's worked for us, and our daughter's reached an age where it doesn't have an impact on her. I think she actually is enjoying it. But that's sort of the story on my side of how the career came to be. We really did, as the bio said, have a number of years where we were doing tours back to back in Latin America or in and out of Washington during that time frame. We did not join the Foreign Service thinking that we were going to spend so many years in Latin America. It just really, that was one of the maybe decisions that ended up being made for us or became a very logical one to make, because it was much easier to try to get the tandem assignments when we both had become fairly well-known entities with reputations and abilities to make the move and stay together by continuing to work, in his case in WHA and in my case on the big jump for us obviously came after the Baghdad assignment, the move into Europe. And for me, it hard work, but I think also testament to the career that I was able to make the jump with him and have the assignment I do now. So I'll stop there. I'm sure people will have questions, but that's how really making the joint decisions and some of the trade-offs and strategic decisions along the way to be gainfully employed over the 26 years that he's been in the Foreign Service, including 19 years out of Washington.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. That was fantastic. Let's now go to Donna Gorman.
Okay, hi everyone. I have been a Foreign Service spouse, a diplomatic security spouse actually, for the last 22 years. My understanding is today you're wanting some advice on how to find a good job and keep it. So my best advice for you would be that you need to be prepared to invent yourself and reinvent yourself every time you move. It's a painful process, but you have to do it. I've been doing it since before we joined the Foreign Service, when I talked my way into an advertising agency with a master's in Russian. Then I got to my first post, Moscow, and I had the great Russian experience, and the advertising agency wanted to keep me, but I was just tired and I was ready to take a step back. So I used the opportunity to look around the embassy, and I took a few jobs at the embassy. I worked as the consular associate, I worked as the newsletter editor, and back up again, I decided it was the most important thing to invent myself again. So I called myself a writer. I told everybody I was a writer. It wasn't a lie. I had been doing a lot of writing in various jobs at the ad agency and with the newsletter, but I wasn't exactly a professional writer. I turned myself into one at that point and started writing articles and columns for people. What I would suggest to you is that you look at what you have and what you've done and turn yourself into that. When you show up at posts, don't necessarily say, I'd like to. You know, if you're the person who always throws dinner parties, then you are now an event planner. If you're the mom who always makes the fabulous cupcakes, you are now a local caterer. You know, you have to find a way to take what you have and package it into something that other people are going to want when you get to post. I have found the most luck initially getting jobs at the embassy in most places I've been, and then keeping my freelance writing on the back burner. So at almost every embassy I've been at, I've worked either as an EPAP in public diplomacy, where I was, again, a writer, or in China, I was an assistant human rights officer where I wrote the human rights report. So everything I did, I tried to tie into being a writer. So yeah, think about inventing yourself. The next thing I would say is when you get to post, don't be in a hurry. Don't rush into the first job you see if you have time. You want to find the person you want to work with. So I would get to post and tell everyone at post, this is what I want to do. This is who I am. This is what I can offer. And at some posts, people have actually invented jobs for me. You know, when I went to China, the position wasn't, but they needed help. I told the right people that I was a writer, and they basically created the job so that I could do it. And I found that when I'm patient and I take my time trying to find the right job, I usually don't end up in one of those positions where you have the worst boss at post. You know that one? The other thing I would say is that I've tended to be very realistic in my expectations. I knew going in that I was not going to have a normal career path. And it's hard sometimes when I look at people like a very dear friend of mine when I worked at the ad agency is now the president of a huge entertainment company in Los Angeles. My intern when I worked there that I trained is now the senior vice president of a gigantic global fashion company. And it's hard to look at those people and think, well, if they've gotten there, shouldn't I be there too? So I've had to be kind of realistic in the idea that I didn't get there, but I got here, and where I am is pretty cool. I've got a random collection of work that I've put together in all these cool countries, and I really can call myself a writer now. I'm an actual professional writer. The other thing I think you really have to do is you have to make your employer see what you're going to do. Either your potential employer, if you're going to post without a job, or the employer you have here if you want to keep your job. Don't just say, I want to work remotely if you have a job here in the States. You have to go to them and say, here's what I've been offering, here's what I can continue to offer, and here's how it's going to work for you. Here's what I'm going to offer to you. Because they're not going to just hire you to be remote because you want to. You have to explain how it's going to work and how it's going to benefit them to have the continuity of keeping you on. So, for example, my current job as the associate editor at AFSA is not going to stay. I'm moving to Moscow. I have to leave. But I've been able to go to my boss and say, I can't keep this, but here as a writer is what I can still do for you from Moscow. So I'll be able to take pieces of my job with me to Moscow and continue to work on that. I have other freelance companies I work with on a freelance basis. And same thing, when I'm moving, I go to them and say, here's how we're going to work together. Here's what I can offer. And I make it so that so they can see what I can do, and they want that. The other thing you have to do is you have to be realistic. You're not going to be the CEO of a company unless you own it. You know, you have to think about the trade-offs. You're going to get something from this lifestyle, and it's not necessarily going to be a huge paycheck, but there is a way to build a career and to build a resume when you go post to post and you visualize what you want in a realistic manner, and you go out and find the people at Post who can help you, or find the people in your current assignment who can help you. So those are kind of my best things that I can say, is to think about inventing yourself constantly, reinventing yourself constantly. Think about what it is you want to do and what it is you want to be and who it is you already are based on your experiences. And then tell everyone you meet at Post and everyone you meet at your current job, this is who I am, this is what I can do. Make them see what you can offer them. And then be realistic about where you can go in terms of your money and your promotion levels. And when you put all those things together, you can probably cobble together a pretty decent career. You'll have some strange gaps in your career. I have some weird places where it's hard to explain when I have to fill out those security forms because I'm not working, and everybody's going to have that. But you will, in the end, when I look back over my 20 years, I can see how each one of those jobs that I took got me into this place where now I have a pretty solid career as a freelance writer. Not just for AFSA doing things, but I also work as a writer for other companies that hire me wherever I am to do writing and editing. They know I'm fast, they know I can turn it around quickly, and it's been a process building to that point. But you can definitely get there if you look at what skills you have and pull them in and share with your community what you have to offer. That's it for me.
Let's go to Jeremy.
Hello everyone. So my name is Jeremy Pollock. I am an EFM. We've got a little bit of a different take on this entire thing. My wife and I, or actually I guess I should tell you. So I run a wealth management practice. I am a financial planner. I've been in finance for my entire adult career. And so my position is a little different. I went from being an expert in my field to not really having to get up in the morning waiting on a clearance for over a year at an embassy. So I had a bit of a difficult take. But right now I run a practice with one other financial advisor and a team that we have. And really, for me, my wife and I, we got married about 2 years ago, so we are, on the start of the other side here. So for those of you that are new into this, I share some of your feelings and the difficulties that you're going through. For me, when my wife and I got married, I told her, hey, look, do whatever is going to make you happy, and we're going to figure it out along the way. I keep picture of her on my desk at work, and I'm always gonna, and it's gonna depend on your personality type, obviously, but for us, that's how it has been since we got together, and that's how it's always gonna be. And that's the same thing for her. And so our story was, I ended up giving up my career. I was based in one of our offices in Washington, D.C. And so when we were in Tunisia, was our first post together. So when I went to my office and I said, hey, my wife got this, she got posted in Tunisia. They basically looked at me and said, where's Tunisia? So because of a number of different regulatory factors and a few other things, they were not going to allow me to work for an extended period of time overseas. So we had to make a choice. And for me, that choice was really easy. We didn't want our first year of marriage to be a long distance one. And looking back, we wouldn't have changed it whatsoever. We gave it a shot, and we both looked at each other after a year of waiting for a public trust clearance with no end in sight. And we were like, this is not for you. This type of lifestyle is not for either one of us. We're gonna do something else. We're gonna figure it out. And so for me and my wife, that's what has always been good for us, is just, hey, having that communication and having that openness to be, and talk about those types of things where, hey, this isn't for you. And so that was almost half a year ago now. I had a number of different issues, and I know it's not the biggest or the main focus of this conversation, but there is a lot of emotional and mental things that go along with leaving a career, or just not really feeling like you have any purpose, that comes along with having a job that you're really interested in. And so if you do or are having those feelings, you're not alone. I have shared them, being in EFM, where, you go from knowing something to giving up a lot, and then just kind of not really having a whole lot to wake up to every single day. But there are a lot of positives. That's the way that I always like to look at it. Now, since I've gone back, I run a team of 4 people. I have complete autonomy. The other week, I met my wife out in Amsterdam for a week, and I was able to work and do client reviews from my iPad and whatnot. So we always tell each other that, we're making lemonade. Whatever life gives us, we're going to make lemonade. And so it's the same thing that I said before, but we're just always going to, for me, it's the relationship that I have with my wife, hands down, and the communication that we have that has really led to my and her success. And we're just going to continue to figure it out as we go. My salary and whatnot definitely allow for us to be able to do some of these types of things, where I do have the luxury of being able to travel back and forth and spend a lot of time outside of the office. But there's also, right now, the industry that I'm in, I have to make sure that I am in the United States within a certain period of time to be able to give people advice in the United States without running into anybody slapping my wrist or whatnot. So that, I guess, in a nutshell, is our story and kind of what makes us work. And I'll just leave it there.
Thank you very much, Jeremy, for that. And let's go to Jessica.
Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you may be. My name is Jessica Hayden, and I relate to a little bit of what each one of the prior speakers has talked about. My husband and I got married in 2003, right after I had finished my first year of law school. And so, like Jeremy, we decided we didn't want to spend a year apart, so we moved to Kazakhstan together. And I showed up after a year of law school, and I didn't have a job. But I really looked at it as an opportunity to try new things. And so, like Donna, I decided to call myself a writer. and I dabbled in writing for those few years, and ended up getting a job at USAID, where I worked in the regional legal office. And so that was now 16 years ago. And really, in the early days, my husband and I made a really explicit decision that we would trade off, much like Cheryl and her husband. So after 2 years in Kazakhstan, we came back to DC, where I finished law school. And then he actually turned down a really good job so I could take a clerkship with the judge. And so really, we made a very conscious decision that he would get a few years and I would get a few years. And that has worked really well. In terms of advice, I think looking back, I've really been able to leverage the international experience I have into my legal jobs, to where it isn't a negative, but it's actually a positive. So I can sell myself as somebody who has experience in Turkey, who has experience in the Caucasus. And right now what I do is, I had worked for 21st Century Fox, and we were just purchased by Disney. And I do sanctions work and anti-bribery work. So knowing what the risks are from a corruption standpoint on the ground in these countries, I can bring a level of knowledge to my job that someone who's always been in the US doesn't have that same sort of insight. Another thing that I found really helpful is to leverage my foreign service connections, not necessarily at Post, but people in the DC community, in the legal community, who have some sort of connection to the Foreign Service and understand what this life is like. One little story, when I was at my law firm, I found out that the head of the law firm, his daughter, who was also a lawyer, had married a Foreign Service officer. And they moved to Istanbul. She left her legal career. And when she got there, she really had a hard time finding work. And so I found that as a wonderful opening to start talking to him about my challenges as I moved. And so we had a lot of discussions about it. And eventually, when I left the law firm, he helped create a job for me with our client so I could continue working. So I think if you can find those kind of advocates in the jobs that you have now, who understand the value that you can bring to the job and don't see moving around as a negative, it goes a really long way in helping with continuation and opening doors where there might not otherwise be. And within my current job, I'm only in DC. I'm in DC now after Turkey, and we're moving in 2020. And as we walked into a new corporation, I was really nervous about how Disney would view remote work. And I've been really lucky to have advocates who, I travel a lot for work. So I've been lucky to have advocates who say, you know, she does a good job, and it doesn't matter whether she's based in DC or whether she's based in Turkey, you know, she can get the job done. And so that's been really helpful for me. And then I wanted to follow up on one thing that Jeremy said in terms of opportunities. I'm really happy with what I do right now, and it is not the path I would have ended up on had I not married my husband. So I think I would have ended up in a corporate law firm and probably been pretty miserable trying to make partner. And I really am thankful for these crazy experiences we've had and being flexible and taking the different kinds of jobs along the way. It's been fun. So it can be stressful at times, but overall, I'm really grateful for this life and all of the opportunities that have come out of it. So I'm really happy to answer any questions from folks about my specific career or advice on how to get the next job.
So the first question we have is, and this could be directed, I think, to several of the speakers. Do you normally let your employer or potential employer know in advance that you'll have to move in 2 or 3 years? If so, at what point do you let them know? As early as the job interview or later? Who wants to take that on?
I can answer that. Let's see, can you hear me? No, it's not connected. There
You're done.
Okay, yeah, I would say don't tell them. I mean, if you tell them in the interview they don't already appreciate you, they don't know what you can do. So I would think it would be a negative. Once you're in the job and you're settled in and you know the culture, like what Jessica said, you find an advocate who's going to understand the value that you bring to the company, and then you tell them. Don't wait till the last minute because you don't want to leave them hanging. But I found out the day I started this job that I have now, that very day I found out that we were going to be posted to a new country, and it was kind of a hard thing. And so since I knew them, I was able to sort of set it up and make it so that they had a long time to plan for it. But you need to give them a couple of months. If you think you want to transfer with your job, you need to give them more time than that to start thinking about how to make it work. But don't tell them at the interview, because that's gonna ding you. That would be my advice.
Does anybody else have something to add to what Donna said? Okay, let's go to a specific question for Jessica. Jessica, I'm also a lawyer. Which sources do you use to find jobs overseas other than networking? Are you in the Facebook group Lawyers in the Foreign Service? Thanks.
Yes, happy to answer that. I am in that group, and in terms of in Kazakhstan, I found my work once I was on the ground, and I really did cobble a bunch of pieces together. I worked for a law firm that's now no more, called Kuder Brothers, and I reviewed memos and corrected them so they sounded like a native English speaker had written them. When we moved to Azerbaijan, I actually applied for a fellowship through Georgetown. So I showed up with a fellowship for a year working for the American Bar Association. I have found almost always more success doing things on my own rather than trying to go through the embassy, just because I think the legal profession is so unique, and it's better to network through the legal sides rather than the embassy. And then with my last posting, I really did all the networking in DC to have that job in Turkey when I showed up, and that has led to a progression of promotions and other jobs, but within my own organization. So I'm sorry if that's not super helpful in terms of your answer, but that's how it's worked for me thus far. And I'd be happy to talk with you offline on other opportunities in the legal profession.
Great, thanks very much, Jessica. The next question is, how important is having or not having a master's degree in helping you to find new opportunities? I'm currently looking to pursue a master's degree on our new post. Thank you for sharing all your inspiring stories. Who wants to take that one? I think we have a couple of master's degree holders. I think we have, almost everyone has a master's degree. So this can be a general question that people can answer in the series.
I would definitely say do it, especially if you have the time at post. I went in and I already had mine before I got to post. So that was a question that was always asked to me was, oh, hey, well, if you're here, you could, probably do like an online course or something. I was like, I already did that. But if you have the time, definitely, it's never anything that is going to further your education or any sort of skills that you have is never gonna hurt you. And especially if the government or anyone else is gonna help you pay for it, by all means, use all of those resources that you can. I would say that, and like a couple of these ladies have already said, meet as many people as you can. You never know where you're gonna run into these people later on in life and what opportunities that they can bring to the table because of you guys having this foreign service connection. It's kind of crazy the amount of clients that I have that are through foreign service or other things that have come up just because of being a part of this very, very distinct group of people.
Does anybody else want to take on the master's degree question?
I'm happy to jump with that one. As I shared in my story, I very deliberately did plan a master's degree around one of our domestic assignments. I didn't want to do a correspondence type of program. I did want to try to do it full time, in part for building the network and for seeing that that could be an invaluable part of trying to make a career work. In my case, again, I know I have a unique track, sort of career track in some respects, given I have been with the same employer for so long, but it was going into the master's degree really hoping that I had the aspirations to end up with the type of position that I've managed to get and keep around all of the different career moves, but it would absolutely not have been possible in my case without the master's degree. And I would just second what Jeremy was saying as well. Opportunity to further an education or build some skill set is one to be absolutely seized upon. So I would just second that.
Thanks
And
very
for me,
much.
I'm sorry to keep speaking through, but I think the network that I did build through business school has served me, even though I've stayed with the same employer. It was an absolutely right decision, and the networking and the building of the relationships and relying upon those that I think pretty much everyone has shared as part of their stories or tips for success just would echo that as well. Absolutely has made a world of difference.
Thanks very much. The next question is, and I would like the speakers to be specific about examples in answering this question. Have you leveraged your experience of travel or living internationally in finding professional opportunities? We know that you all have told in your stories examples of this, but if you have any more specific examples or more advice along this line and how people can leverage this unique experience we have, please go ahead.
I can say something about that. If you are a writer, that's your entree right there. You can write from anywhere, and having that international experience makes a difference. My first article that I wrote for Time magazine, they contacted me because they specifically wanted somebody who understood Russia to write an essay for them. And I was able to leverage that into other, like, oh, you want Russia? I can tell you Kazakhstan too. I can tell you Beijing too. And I was able to write a series of articles for them based on that experience. So if you are doing something with writing, absolutely, that's going to be the thing that makes you stand out. You can write columns for the post op-ed section if something's happening in your country that only you can talk about. It's been great for me.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks. Oh, go ahead, Jessica.
Yeah, I'd love to follow up on that. I don't think I would have the job I have today if I didn't have the international experience, because I can bring to the table the American legal side. So I deal a lot with the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. So I need to have the American lawyer knowledge and expertise around that set of laws and those regulations. But the knowledge that I have of what it's actually like to live and do business in Kazakhstan or in Turkey. Some of the language experience has helped me. I mean, my Russian is terrible. Donna can attest to that. But, to be able to show up in Moscow and be able to talk to the cab driver, they didn't know that I was actually saying, can you please repeat that again 10 times? But, then you become known as somebody who actually has some substantive knowledge on the ground of language, of culture, of the way businesses work. And there are not a lot of Americans who can bring that to the table, to have both the expertise on the American side and the international. So I think it can be, I think if you can find the right career and the right employer, you can really sell that as an asset.
Yeah.
Much, Jessica. I'm going to group the next three questions together, and because some of them are pretty specific. The first is, how important have language skills been in your experience? Have you taken FSI language? The second is, how do you manage to explain gaps in your work on your CVs? And the third is, have any of you been able to work remotely for a company for which you didn't already have an established relationship? So we'll take answers from anybody who wants to answer one of those three questions. What
was the first one again?
How important have language skills been in your experience, and have you taken FSI language? Maybe we could add, have you tested in FSI language?
I have not. I sat with a private French teacher for a year while in Tunis, and for me, it has helped connect with some people, but I may not be the best one on this panel to answer that question.
Okay. Thanks, Jeremy.
You guys have been in it longer than I have. You probably have a better take on it.
Okay. Anybody else?
I definitely took on that, if I can jump in. I took Russian in the university. I taught Russian at the University of Southern California. I've never really used my Russian because every time we've gone to Moscow, we've either been having a baby or just not wanting to work or whatever. So the only time I used my Russian is I did take the test at FSI for a job that was a potential job that ended up not coming through. It made me happy to get the score and know that I could compete against any one of those FSOs in Moscow. And actually, the way I use that is when I get that, you know how you get that attitude sometimes from people because you're just a spouse? It's kind of fun in Russian to throw out that I might be just a spouse, but my language score is better than yours. It's true though, you get that attitude, and that's how I use my master's degree too. It did help me because I took the foreign service test and I was offered a job as a foreign service officer based on my Russian skills. I turned it down because I was like, I can't do the tandem couple thing. It's too much. It's hard to split up your family. But it helps because it looks good on your resume and it makes you comfortable going into another post knowing that, hey, if I can learn Russian, I can learn Arabic too, right? Not, but it gives you that sense of success and that sense of confidence that you need to move around and to talk your way into new jobs.
I'll jump on the language one as well. I am fluent in Spanish and Portuguese, but I didn't get any of it by being a spouse going through the FSI courses. I would have loved to have been able to do that, but never, because I was employed, wasn't able to, when my husband was going through the language programs, enrolled to a company. So I learned both of those languages through, I'll be perfectly honest, brute strength, awkwardness, and full immersion, looking like a fool for the first several weeks and months as I learned the language, but did learn them that way, and they've been absolutely invaluable. And one of the reasons, again, that, as I was saying, the career had us in Latin America for such an extended period of time was because I had the language skill as well as then the advancement within the current employer to keep going. A little bit to what was just shared as well. I got my Spanish in Venezuela, which isn't exactly the best place to learn it through full immersion, but it's where I did. But it did serve me well in our second tour when my husband was in Costa Rica and I was crafting together several different positions. I did have the fluent Spanish, and for that reason was able to get the positions in the embassy, as I said, stepping in the consular section to be on the line, doing some of the visa interviews, not able to adjudicate because I wasn't a foreign service officer, but able to at least, because I had the language skills, jump in immediately when they had a huge staffing gap and needed some support. So it served me very well. I'm now in a part of the world where I will be perfectly honest, I don't speak any of the languages. I haven't been in that situation, given I had the Spanish and Portuguese, and it's very, very difficult. I will eventually get them. Again, would have loved to have had the language skills or the language training in advance, but I firmly believe that it's best if you can to get the language skills and capitalize on those opportunities as well.
Julie, can I speak to the remote part of that question? They were asking remotely. This is kind of important. If you're on Facebook, there's actually a Facebook group that's called EFM, Helping EFMs Find Employment. And I actually found a job there with a fantastic company that's run by another EFM who understands local issues, and she was looking for an editor and hired me for a short-term job, and I ended up being a long-term freelancer for them. But I find in that group that people will refer people to other companies that they either know of or at that are looking for more work. So it's a great place to go in and find, if there's something there, these people are remote. EFM group. So if you're not in that group, you might want to think a bit about getting into it. I think it's called EFMs, Helping EFMs Find Employment on Facebook. And it's a great way to get into a remote job you wouldn't have even heard of before.
Yeah.
That's very helpful, Donna. Thanks for that. Does anybody want to answer the how do you explain gaps in your CV question?
I would love to.
Good one.
Thank you, Jessica.
I think a lot of times you don't have to. I think people, not just foreign spouses, have gaps in their resume. One of the things that I did, I had our first child, our second year in Baku, and I wasn't working then. My resume has a year gap, and I just never say anything about it. If asked, we are in a period of transition. But I think there's a lot of volunteer things, a lot of experience. People, all around the world travel and use that as a base to learn more about themselves, learn about what they want to do with their lives. So I think there's a lot of ways to craft those answers if you are asked. I never go in to an interview with the idea that I proactively have to explain why I've moved around so much, or I proactively have to explain why there are gaps. I present who I am and what I can offer, try to really spin it in the most positive light possible.
Thanks for that, Jessica.
Can I say something on that too?
Sure, Jeremy.
So in my world, when I have one other advisor that I work with, and when we invest you in a certain product, you get sent a piece of paper from us, and it has my work history that is approved through FINRA on it, right? So everybody that we invest through our client base, they get basically my resume, and it shows this year of leave where I was overseas and didn't work. And so I have been sitting at a table with clients of ours, and they've been like, so I've had, I see that you're, why did you take a year off? Why did you do this? And I just be honest with them, and I tell them our story, and then it just turns into a conversation about, tell me about your wife more, tell me about this and that. So being honest and upfront, I think is the best way to go. But it's been somewhat comical as well to hear people's reactions, especially in smaller towns where you're like, she's where? In what country? And then it just goes from there. So
Thanks, Jeremy. We now have a couple of specific questions to speakers and a couple of general questions. This is to Donna. Donna, what resources did you use when you were first starting out writing to find writing jobs? And how would you recommend going about getting started as a freelance writer?
Okay, so that's a huge question, but it depends on what kind of writing you want to do. If you want to write for newspapers and magazines, it's a lot easier now than when I started. When I started, they had just kind of invented dial-up internet, and I was in Moscow trying to find contacts online, and I had to hard copy essays to people and wait 3 weeks to get, for it to get there. Now you can go online and you can find contacts for various journals and magazines and newspapers, and you submit stuff to them via their online apps. You can write things, for example, for the Foreign Service Journal. We have a whole column for Family Member Matters, and it pays $200 a column, and we get submissions from people who are in your situation, and it's a way to build your resume and to have some articles published. So I would recommend looking at the Foreign Service Journal, frankly. If you want to work as a business editor where there's a lot more money, but it's more boring writing, then what you have to do is you have to go out to the business through their HR department or through your contacts and let them know what your experience is, the same as you would applying for any job. And try and get a job ghostwriting things for them or editing for them. Then it helps to have an editing certification from a university, which you can get online. So you have something to explain why you're qualified. So those are two different ways into writing. And one just takes a lot of elbow grease of looking up contacts and submitting stories. And the other is more figuring out how you can work as a writer for a private company. You have to go search for those private companies. In either case, the internet is definitely your friend. It was not mine starting out.
Thanks for that, Donna. This is a specific question for Jessica. Jessica, I know your experience has been mostly outside of the embassies, but from what you have seen, what kind of positions might be available for lawyers within embassies or consulates? Thanks.
It's a great question, and one that I had when I was first starting out, and I expected there to be a lot more for lawyers inside embassies. And really, what I've found over the years is even within the foreign service jobs, there are a lot of retired lawyers who are joining as a second career. But actual legal jobs are very few. I think some great fits. My first job in Kazakhstan was with the USAID Regional Legal Advisor. I understand that AID has, I think, 7 or 8 of these positions across the world. And they are really kind of the advisor to the mission from a legal perspective. So when I was working, I did some landlord-tenant disputes. It was a smattering of different legal issues, but that was really good experience. I think at some other embassies, what I've seen are, DOJ sometimes sends reps to embassies, so there might be opportunities there. And then a lot of the, political jobs or the econ jobs can be helpful in terms of building your expertise in certain areas that can then later be used in a more traditional legal job. But I'm sure that the person who asked this question has seen this. It's, there is not a general counsel to each embassy, which I wish there was, because that would be great.
Thanks very much. The next question is general. I've only ever worked for the federal government and state nonprofit organizations. That means I've always had someone else doing the HR details for me. What are some of the administrative things I might need to be aware of when setting up freelance work overseas? That's a general to any one of the speakers.
I can start on that one. When I first moved overseas to Turkey, I was working as a consultant for a client. And so I set up my own S corporation. And I hired an accountant to help me with that, someone who deals with a lot of foreign service spouses, because the taxes are different. So you have to pay both the employee and the employer taxes as a consultant. I hate taxes. Jeremy, I'm sorry, I hate all things financial. So I messed it up multiple times. I've paid penalties. So I highly recommend getting advice from someone who knows how to do that. But that's been my experience. In terms of freelance, and I did do some freelance writing early on, and Donna, you can speak to this. But what I did then is I'd never set up a corporation, but I just paid estimated taxes to the extent, and my writing income was so small, it was pretty easy to do.
You don't make a lot of money as a writer for sure, so you don't have to worry about setting up all that freelance stuff for a good 10 years. I'm hating to tell you this. It was a long time before I made enough money that it mattered. And that makes it tricky from a financial perspective. You should probably hire Jeremy to help you out.
All right.
Everybody loves free advertising, hey?
This is a very general question. What suggestions do any of you have for someone who's a little confused about what to do for a career?
That's such a hard question.
Back 20 years.
Wow.
Can I just say that you're never going to figure out what you want to be when you grow up? It's just not going to happen. So you have to find out what somebody told me once. If you're happy, if you're more than 50% happy and less than 50% miserable, you're probably in the right place, which is a sad way to look at it. But really it helps if you don't.
What happened?
Oh. Lost her.
Uh-oh.
What happened?
She froze.
Oh no.
I don't know.
I think we lost Donna.
It looks like we lost the whole site. Internet just went down entirely for me.
Well, they're on. Sure. I think
Yeah, they're still, you all are still on, right?
Yeah, it's got
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I think that we will continue with the questions because they're still coming in. Thanks so much for sharing your experiences. In place of a master's degree, do you think specific certifications would be helpful in securing positions? I've worked with the nonprofit sector, and I'm eyeing a certificate in nonprofit management, but I wonder how it's perceived by employers. Anybody want to take it?
Do you want me to say something about that?
Sure, Jeremy. Yeah, you.
I saw one of these other questions on here too, so maybe I'll piggyback it on there. But so I have a certified financial planning designation, and then I also am working with the CFA Institute as well. But for my designation, because of tax laws in the United States and how they're different from other countries, a lot of the planning and my expertise is only good for those that are U.S. citizens and abide by our tax code, and a couple other countries that may be pegged or follow similar rules. So if you do or are going to plan on being in that field, just maybe know the limitations of it, if it is going to be specific to, a U.S. country or whatnot. But I mean, I guess that would be my take on it. I don't know if you ladies have something else to kind of add in there, but there is some difficulty when, like for me especially, having to abide by our securities regulations and whatnot, and then everything being completely different and having to, like, if I were to go and want to trade securities in Europe and whatnot, I'd have to get recertified, everything. So there are some limitations there when you start to cross borders. But if that's really what you want to do, yeah, by all means.
Thanks very much for that, Jeremy. And that's an important point, that there are different regulations in different countries. We have a question here on, for those of you who work for large corporations or large entities, do you think bureaucracies are actually easier to navigate for too high? Are there more opportunities, or do you think smaller companies or organizations might be easier? That's a thought-provoking one. Anybody want to take it?
Cheryl's been in a big
Happy.
organization.
I was going to say, clearly I've been successfully navigating one. It is a thought-provoking question, and I guess I would caveat it by saying on both sides, but it's certainly been far from easy to navigate two careers in an organization that has offices in nearly as many places as there are U.S. embassies or consulates. We have offices in more than 100 countries, and even with that, it hasn't been particularly easy, or it's taken a lot of advanced planning and strategic decisions, as I was alluding to before, to make the dual career moves work. It did basically for a very long time in our careers when we were much more junior. It really had us not pigeonholed, but if we wanted to successfully do what we were doing, we were becoming Latin American specialists. And that absolutely was the furthest thing from our minds when my husband joined the Foreign Service, and again, cognizantly made the decision to come on this, very fun lifestyle together. Maybe it's easier in some respects in that there is the possibility, there are the offices, there is the hope, but it's really taken a lot of behind the scenes conversations, carefully planned, getting to know people, starting almost a year in advance each time, and even up until the very end, not knowing that it was a done deal, even though a year of conversations have been taking place. I haven't been in a particularly small organization, but I have the contrast with Anderson, which was also a large organization. And I shared the story that I thought in theory, maybe naively, at an earlier stage in my career, that it would have been possible. And it was an absolutely miserable experience, and they weren't prepared or set up for it, and had very different perspective on what it would mean to have someone who was trying to have this lifestyle. So trade-offs, I can't speak to the smaller, but I think there are differences on either side of it. For me, the large organizations is where I've been. It's worked, but with a lot of hard work and a lot of trade-offs or intentional, mindful decisions made along the way.
Thanks very much for that, Cheryl. We have, we're going to take one more question, and then I'm going to pose to the panel a general question to close. The last question before the general one is, which website sources did you use to find remote work? Have you used FlexJobs, for instance? Do you recommend any websites such as FlexJobs, and do they work? Thanks very much.
I have not. I can say that I've only used my connections that I have with people that I know to find work. When I got back to the States, I tried to use USA Jobs, and I applied for every writer-editor job within a 30-mile radius that I was qualified for. Didn't get a single response, which was really demoralizing. So I turned to my personal networks, people I know, the EFM jobs, Facebook page, things like that, and that's where I've gotten all of my work.
For that, Donna. We did get a couple of questions on security clearances and bilateral agreements, bilateral work agreements, and we will answer them by email directly to the people who asked them. Or you could email me with the question and I'll respond. I have one last general question for everybody, and that is, if you were starting out today, what would you want to have known about looking for professional positions outside the embassy? Jeremy, do you want to go first?
Sure. Outside. I wish I would have known how hard it was going to be for me personally to just sit and do nothing. I've known that I have to be doing something, and for me to like be in my role, I'm always the one that has to give you the right response or have an answer for you, right? I'm the one that's there to help. And for me, it was it was so hard just sitting and waiting and not having control over the situation. So as far as work outside the embassy, the bright side of that, though, I mean, there's two sides to every coin, right? So I can't stress enough before even just, the question about the flex jobs or what website. Meet as many people as you can because you never know what opportunities are going to come from people that you're going to meet. And I can't see any of you, but if I can help in any way, please reach out. I'll have a conversation with you. I don't know in what way I could help, but if I can offer anything, please use all of the people and the resources that you have, because you never know what tomorrow is going to bring. Like a lot of these people have said, they didn't think they'd be where they are today. And my situation, even though we had a rough time with our first post, like it's definitely better now. And we've met a lot of great people that have been able to help us out. So hope I can do the same.
Thanks very much for that offer, Jeremy. How about Jessica?
Yeah, I think looking back on it, when we started this lifestyle together, we were very young and both wanted to have full careers in our own right. And I think a huge thing for me, I have had some embassy jobs, but it has been for my own sense of self-worth, and I think everybody who's in this life knows how tough it can be to be the spouse and be known as the spouse. So having something outside of the embassy that is just me has been incredibly helpful to my own well-being. And that said, I would say one thing that I wish I could tell myself back then is to continually check in with my husband. We had this agreement when we first started that he would have a few years and I would have a few years. And I think one of the things that's helped, and we should probably even do it more often, is to continually check in and be really explicit about what you need and what you want. And so that there's no misunderstanding or miscommunication. And I think when the two spouses support each other and really put each other's careers on the same level, it's super helpful.
Thanks very much for that advice, Jessica. Cheryl?
My response was going to be very similar to Jessica's that she just gave. I think that we came in also very, very young and maybe very idealistic in terms of how easy it might be to make two careers go both on upward tracks rather than a lot of lateral moves or zigzag ways to make it work. And I think maybe just recalibrating for people that are starting now, or if I were younger and starting again, just that realization that careers come in lots of different shapes and sizes and paths, and they're all fascinating. And this illusion that it was going to be, two vertical careers and that we were going to be able to keep moving in that respect very quickly became the realization that there were trade-offs for both of us at different stages with very early in the career, and absolutely the right decision for us. I don't think I would be sitting here saying that I've been a EFM for 26 years and we wouldn't still be married if it hadn't been because of the very cognizant trade-offs of when one of us was going to take the next advancement and the other one was just going to make the assignment work. We are at a stage now, and maybe it was the never planned and swore we were never going to do it, separation through the unaccompanied tour, that really was a very hard decision taken together, but very much the right thing for us. And I guess gave us trust and faith in the fact that we had been investing both in our relationship and in two careers, that we made that 1 year work. And now we're making this, as I described it, very funny commuting arrangement that I have, which again, if you had asked me when I was younger, is that something I would have done? I would have absolutely told you under no circumstances, life's too short, never. But it's just panned out that it's the right thing. So I guess the lesson for me, or the if I were talking to my younger self, was just keep a really open mind, and some of the things that you thought you knew about yourself, you realize are completely the contrary as you go down the path. But for me, it's been an absolutely fascinating journey, and we do have two very successful careers that have been crafted together, and I'm very thankful and blessed with that. But it's been through a lot of hard work and perseverance at the same time.
Thanks very much for that.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah, real quick.
Real quick. I will just say that those two ladies have it spot on, because I am a lot newer at this with me and my wife, and there are times where we haven't done the check-in and we haven't had that communication, and that's when stuff blows up, and it's just but doing those two things and having that open mind is what has gotten us to where we are right now. So they've got it spot on, and it is like talking to her.
Great, Jeremy. Thanks. Donna? Not Donna.
Okay.
Come on. All right. No, I think, Donna, we're going to have to hold. There seems to be some feedback issues. Sorry about that. Can you speak now? Yeah. All right. Not happening. What I did want to remind everybody about is we had a couple of specific questions for specific speakers that we did not get to, and we can direct them to the speakers themselves. So we will send some update communications to the speakers with those questions, and they can answer you directly. And thank you very much for everyone participating. And I'm sorry we didn't get to all the questions, but we really appreciate you being here this morning, and particularly from those in the Eastern Standard Time time zone, because it was an early start. So thanks very much, and we look forward to doing this again. Thank you.
Thanks.
Are we out?